Welcome to the Get It Done podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Ryan. Today we're interviewing Michelle Dugan. Let's get it done.
Hey, Jimmy, how are you?
What's up? Let's do it. I should have prepped you that that's coming. You're like, hey, what's up?
Whoopsies.
Look, we were talking about StreamYard and how cool it is, but you can like play videos, but then it mutes you. And then you're like, oh, hey, hi, and then intro. Well, look, I'm super pumped to have Michelle on because, and I'm glad that happened because it just makes it so much like we can start this out by laughing our faces off. Michelle is a leader in the mortgage space. She is the owner of MS Lending, the #1 broker in the state of Mississippi for America's largest wholesale lender. She is a Lighthouse recipient. Is it the Lighthouse?
That was a Lighthouse.
It's the Lighthouse recipient at Amplify. And if you've been to Amplify, you know the significance of that. And she has a podcast of her own. It is Blondes Have More Funds. Michelle, welcome to the Get It Done podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm really pumped about this because it's been a while since we've talked.
It has, yes.
And I met Michelle at Amplify, and I know some pretty powerful stories that you have under the hood, and I want to get into those. But before I do, is there anything maybe I missed? I know you also, as like you're married, you have a beautiful family. Which is something that I think a lot of times people miss. We just look at all like the accolades, but like, why are we actually living? Well, here, this is why. Yeah. Anything else that I maybe missed in my brief intro?
I don't think so. Life is crazy. Just having 3 kids in general and a husband makes life pretty eventful, but then you throw a mortgage company and loan officers and employees on top of it. And so, yeah, there's never a dull life here or never a dull day in the life here, rather.
I mean, it's hard enough being a mortgage loan officer, but owning a company, like, my goodness. So somebody said, why don't you just start your own company, Jimmy? Why don't you just do that? No, I don't want that. I don't want that stress of it. But I mean, I don't know. You carry it well though, Michelle. I mean, you look like you don't run a mortgage company. I don't know, but I know all the work that goes into it. And
makeup helps, face creams and stuff.
Well, you certainly command it. So I want to jump right into this. So the Get It Done podcast is really all about the come up story. And we use Elon Musk as an example. He has a story of making $1 million and going all the way to $1 billion. And that's a great story, fine. But we're really looking for the 0 to $1 million story, the come up story. So Michelle, the best place to start with that is, where were you born? What was your early childhood like? What would your mother do? What did your father do? What was that early life like?
Yeah, so I was born here in Mississippi, which is where I still live and originate today. My mom she at the time, she worked for an attorney doing title work and stuff all over the state. So I grew up traveling to the courthouses all over the state of Mississippi and was around real estate lingo pretty much all of my life. And then once I was in college, I got a friend's dad that reached out to me, and he had an opening at his law firm and wanted me to come just help and answer the phones. And so after being there for a few months, I quickly kind of progressed through different roles there. And then it wasn't too long before I was handling all of his loan closings, started making a lot of connections with different people there. And then the next thing I knew, I was getting offered a job to be a mortgage originator, to come start originating. And because I was sending so many referrals to one of the local brokers in town. And at the time I was on track to go to law school. And I was like, why would I want to do this? Why, I've got this dream that I've had all my life of going and being an attorney. And then I started originating and I was like, wait a minute, actually, I think I kind of like this. And so I put law school on hold and never went back. I guess maybe if I'm 60 and I still have that dream of being an attorney, then I can always go back to school. But I love what I do. I love everything about our career, the craziness of it, the uncertainty, that comes along. I love the end result, helping get people in their homes or into better financing, for their particular situation. And so I completely fell in love with it. But it wasn't, a lot of people I feel like you really don't hear about mortgages growing up as a kid. It's not really something that comes up a whole lot in college unless somebody's like in a finance track and they learn about it. And so it's one of those things I feel like most people in our industry just fall into it somehow. And that was exactly what happened with me. I fell in and I'm still here and I absolutely love it.
100%. I mean, it's very I've maybe interviewed one person that it was like, look, I wanted to be this because my dad was this. I think it was Alec Hansen actually, but he grew up with a top producing loan officer dad,
Right. But natural fit.
Law school. I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard somebody say like I was on my way to law school.
Yeah. And I was literally, I had scholarships, everything. I was ready to go. And I ended up deferring my first year thinking, well, I'll just do this for a year. Coincidentally, at the same time that I was accepted to law school, my husband at the time and I found out that we were going to be having a baby. And so that kind of played into part of the decision as well, was that, I'm going to take a year off to raise this little tiny human. And then fell into the mortgage stuff all at the same time. And so life literally did a full, I wouldn't even call it a 360. We did a 720, kind of felt like a tornado there for a little while, but yeah, here I am and never went back to law school.
Well, so, okay, let's go back to early years. So you grew up in Mississippi. Whereabouts? What town?
So I live in a little town called Madison. It's not so little anymore. When we first moved here, I was 3. We had moved from Jackson, which is the state capital, and Madison is just a little suburb. I couldn't even tell you how many people lived here at the time because it was tiny. There was I don't even think there was a stoplight. There was a stop sign and a little small convenience store, and that was it. And now we've got somewhere around 30 to 40,000 people that live here in the suburbs of Madison, which is still just a suburb of Jackson, but we're right here in the middle of the state, right outside the capital.
Wow, cool. So, okay, your mom's a title rep. What'd your dad do?
Yeah, he worked for the state. He did computer IT type stuff for the Department of Human Services. And so, yeah, he was a computer brainiac.
Okay, great. So we got brainiac computer and then title rep. That's I mean, sure, that makes sense. and you're driving around the state with your mom, going to closings and that type of stuff. Well, I guess before that, here, we were talking offline a little bit about our good friend Renee Rodriguez, where we met at Amplify, and how we basically pitch it pretty much every chance.
Everybody needs it.
And he says, I wrote this down the first time I heard it. He says, a lot of the things that we do are the result of something that happens to us between the ages of 8 and 12. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's just something that happens or the way that we're living, and years later, what motivates us, what drives us is to either heal our past or to honor our past. What would you say you're trying to heal or honor from your early years?
Oh, that's a great question. I honestly, at that point in my life, I really had not been through too much trauma or anything like that. Childhood trauma. I had a pretty good, solid life at that point. I thought it was, so what my mom did, and as a part of her job, was she actually handled foreclosures for a local title company and closing attorney. And so I would go to with her to hold all these foreclosure sales on the courthouse steps. And I learned early on what it meant to have your home foreclosed on, and that if you don't pay for it, you can't stay there. So going through all of that, I felt, that's not something that most kids know about. Most kids have no idea what it looks like to own a home, how they pay, how their parents pay for it. It's just not on your radar. So that was something that I definitely learned about very early on. And I knew that I never wanted to be in that situation. I didn't know at that age that I would want to be able to either help save people from that situation or help educate them to make sure it didn't happen to them. But reflecting back on it now, it was something that, you know, it was taught to me very early in life, but it's not conversations that most kids have. It's not, I mean, there's people that are my age, older than me, you know, that are in all different walks of their own personal like home ownership journey that don't understand, you know, all of the ins and outs of foreclosing and paying for it and where the money goes every month and what your payment means. So I definitely had an insight on that very early in life, and I love to continue to educate it about today. So I definitely think that I'm honoring my past, you know, and kind of where I came from and how I grew up with what I do every day. But a lot of the, I think, trials that I went through in my life definitely came after that point.
So what I love is that I actually, so I never knew that about you, and I feel like I know you well. And what a great, I guess, intro to mortgage. I mean, truly,
Right.
I mean, if you're going to be a loan officer, you're trying to help people not go into foreclosure. You know, you want them to be able to, you know, pay for the loan.
Yeah.
And stay there. And really, it's not even about you want them to be able to pay for the loan. You want them to have a great life. You want them to
Right.
experience the benefits of home ownership and
Yeah.
have their kids experience those benefits. That's what you're going for. But I think
Right.
having like the pain of or being able understanding that, like, look, this doesn't always go great, and you need to, I guess, look out for this stuff. I think that can give you a great perspective, especially when you're a mortgage loan officer writing loans.
Right. Without a doubt. You know, it's funny because when I first got into the business, most of my friends were like graduating from college all around the same time. So I always like to say it was kind of like the perfect storm, because in the South, people go to college, they get married, they buy a house right away. So you have some states like California or New York where things are a lot more expensive, and people may be late into their 30s, even their 40s, before they even start thinking about home ownership. Here, for most people, it's on their radars starting in their early 20s. One of the questions that I know I get, I'm sure you get it a lot too, is how much house can I afford? And that's one of my least favorite questions in this business, because what you can afford on paper and what you want, you know, will be able to afford month to month can be completely different numbers. And it's really hard for people to understand that going from an apartment, and maybe you have a $1,200 a month, you know, payment on your apartment, that's not going to be the same as a mortgage, because there's nobody coming behind you to fix your appliances or to take care of these little things that go on. And so I really do get joy out of being able to help people understand the whole big picture and seeing that versus just, this is what my payment is and this is how much it's going to cost, because I don't want to set anybody up for failure. So to be able to educate them ahead of time so that they understand truly what they're getting into, it's definitely a passion of mine.
100%. And it shines through truly as you're just talking about it. Like, look, I care about this. Like, let's do this the right way. What's the, we were talking offline too. What's the sounds in the background we got going on?
Yeah, sorry about this, y'all. So the office next door to me is being finished. They're like just finishing building it. So I work in this super cool little district in my hometown here, and it's all these old homes that have been brought into this one particular piece of land, and they take these old homes and then they renovate them so that they still look old on the outside, but they're all brand new and shiny on the inside. And so the building next door to me is actually a closing attorney whose office is right behind me right now. And they're going to be moving into their new office soon, and they're finishing everything up. So you may hear some hammers and saws and all, but it's just progress and growth. So
under construction, always cool.
Yeah.
And like, look, we don't edit stuff. This is real. This is behind the scenes.
Can you take those hammer sounds out of the background?
Oh my gosh, my editor would hate that.
No doubt. No doubt.
So, all right, take us to more of like high school time.
Yeah.
What was, I guess here we know how you ended up, that you were pointed more towards the legal route. What got you there? What was your, I guess, was there any sports? Was there any major things that happened in high school? First job, first car.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, during my 9th grade year of high school, my mom and dad got divorced. My mom remarried a man from Texas and ended up moving to Texas, and I did not want to go. My dad was still kind of getting life back together as far as he was building a home, living with my grandparents. I didn't really want to do that at the time because I was 15 and his parents were kind of older. And so I ended up moving in with my aunt and uncle. My uncle was probably 30, I want to say around his mid 30s. My aunt was 20, she was like 25 or 26 when I moved in with them. They didn't have any kids at the time. And so I moved in, but there was so much of like my life that I was just having to take care of on my own that I'd never really had to do before. Little things like, I ran out of shampoo, but I don't have a car to be able to run to the grocery store to get more shampoo. So can somebody get me shampoo? You know, just little things that you don't think about as a child. And so I started working pretty much as soon as I could. My very first job, well, I did like babysitting and little things like that. But then I went and worked for a little local deli in town and worked at the cashier, and I worked really as much as I could. I did a program during high school where I would get out of school at like 1 o'clock or so every day. So we would miss like the last block of school and we could go to work, and that's what I did. And so I worked to get some of my high school credits because it counted towards like the credits that I got. And so I started working from a very early age. And if I wanted, you know, new clothes and things like this. And yeah, I mean, my mom would still get me stuff. It wasn't like she just threw me to the wolves or anything like that. But for the most part, any like extras that I wanted in life, I had to buy them myself. I had to get, you know, take care of all of that. So I feel like I developed a really good, you know, work ethic from a very young age, more out of like necessity than just because I wanted to do that. You know, I definitely didn't know what life was going to look like after my mom left and had moved to Texas. And you think it's like, on one hand, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I'm moving in with my aunt and uncle and they're young and they're cool and this is going to be great. But you don't realize all of the other stuff that comes along with that. A lot of it just being, you know, day-to-day needs. And, you know, I had friends and they would complain like, oh my gosh, I can't go out tonight because I have to unload the dishwasher. I didn't clean my room. And at first it was like, oh gosh, that stinks. Like, sorry that you have to do that. But then after, you know, living there for a year or so, it was like, you know, it's kind of weird to not have that structure, to not have anybody telling you like, you have to do this before you can do that. And just instilling that discipline that still comes. I mean, yeah, chores start at an early age for most kids, but it was weird. I definitely missed that structure and, you know, having that parental view over your life, just kind of telling you what to do. So high school was a little crazy. And then after high school, I ended up getting married really young. I was 19 the first time that I got married. I think a lot of that stemmed from, I mean, I could give you the whole psychological background on it, but we probably don't have a few days to talk about that.
Well, I mean, your parents got divorced. You're kind of like, if you're healing or honoring your past, that's literally like you're healing it right there. Well, I'm going to get married and I'm going to live happily ever after. And
right, exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. So the stuff that came in my life definitely came during those, you know, later years in high school. And then you're just, you know, I was looking for, and I didn't know it at the time. I thought it was just like fun and crazy and whatever. But now that I look back on those times as an adult that's been able to like process through all of this, I just wanted stability. I wanted, you know, to know that somebody was going to be there all the time. And was I young and dumb? Absolutely. Like, was it the best decision? No, definitely not. My oldest son, though, I have him, and I wouldn't had I not made, you know, the decision to get married so early. But that definitely was a lot different because where most of my friends were going to college and just doing the whole college thing, I was already married. I was going to college, not because anybody told me that was what I needed to do, but just because I felt like that was the next right step in life. And so I was going to college, but I was also married and trying to work full time and, you know, pay for college on my own, pay for rent and clothes and cars and all of that stuff. So yeah, I got quite an early start on life in several different ways. You asked about my very first car. So my very first car was a Chevrolet Beretta. It was 2-door. It was black. I wrecked it like a week after I got it. I ran off the side of the road and had a big dent in one of the doors for a while until we could get it fixed. On one hand, I hated that car at the time, but now that I look back on it, like I have so many good memories and I just laugh about it because it was, it got me around a lot during the time that I needed it to.
Well, for sure. And I mean, that's everybody. I love everybody's first car story because I mean, like mine just didn't run. It was just like I had a 1978 Ford Mustang, and it just the coolest thing about it was I could say I had a Mustang. But it barely ran, and it was, if you know what a 1978 Mustang looks like, it's ugly. It like there's a little emblem that has a horse on it on the front. If you took that off of it, it's the ugliest car in the world. But if you put it back on, it's like, oh, well, it's a Mustang.
Oh,
so
it's a Mustang, though.
But I have to go back to this. My goodness, 15, your parents move away, and you move in with your aunt and uncle. I mean, yeah, it doesn't surprise me you're a business owner, self-starter, like get out of my way. And I know you as like you entered the room and you own that room. Like, I mean, it's just something where I knowing this now about you, like I see why. It's because you were forced to be an adult at a young age. And I mean, you kind of did get that head start. And I totally get it when you say stability, because as a parent now, and me too as a parent, you don't, I think some parents just don't care, truly, or they're just not that good of parents. Whatever it is, it's not like people try to be bad parents, but just sometimes maybe they just are. But I mean, it's hard to be a good parent. It's hard because it takes a lot of effort, and to just be plopped into aunt and uncle's house, it's not like aunt and uncle know how to be a parent, or
they didn't even have kids at the time. Like they didn't know what they were doing or not doing. And, and it wasn't any fault of their own. I mean, they weren't trying to like be absent in raising me or anything, but to go from just a normal household where you've got mom, dad, and rules and structure and stuff like that to none. It was a massive change, literally overnight.
For sure. And then it's okay. You graduate high school. And you mentioned the law, the legal piece. Were you in law school at 19?
No, so I wasn't in law school yet. So I was I was doing a program that was like a fast track to get into law school a little bit sooner. So
I never went to college. I don't know the process. Sorry, law school is after you get like a degree.
Right. So
okay, got it. Sorry.
Yeah. So normally you'll go for 4 years, you'll get your bachelor's. And then after that, some people will stay and get like a master's or something and then go on to law school. I was actually doing a program where you went for 3 years to undergrad. You didn't take any electives. You were just taking all of your core classes that you needed for your degree. And then you got to start law school in what would have been your 4th year of college. And essentially all of your first year classes in law school would complete your degree. And you would end up with your 4th year, or you'd end up with your full bachelor's degree, but you'd already be 1 full year into college. So it would take it from being a minimum of 7 years down to 6. So that was the path that I was on when I was working at the law firm. And then, so my mom, I told you she, remarried, she'd moved to Texas. I have a little brother and sister at this point. My stepdad had retired. They moved to California. Which that was actually where I met my husband, because I had gone out there for, a few months during summer before I was going to come back to start college, and then ended up that whole plan went awry. And so then we decided right before what would have been the spring semester of my 3rd year. So my my junior year, which essentially should have been the last year of like my bachelor credits as far as in, just the undergrad setting. My husband decided he wanted to move back to California to go back out there. Well, that was not really in the plan, because if I only completed the classes that I needed, then I wasn't going to actually finish my bachelor's. I was going to have 1 year left. I wasn't going to start law school. It was really crazy, but I ended up taking like 21 hours that semester, went to summer school right after, and tested out of a bunch of classes and somehow managed to fit a year and a half of college into about 6 months worth of school. So I did end up finishing with my full bachelor's in I guess in August of that year. We moved back to California. We were there about 6 months, and my husband was like, nope, I don't want to be here anymore. Let's go back to Mississippi. So we came back to Mississippi and all the while I had been in undergrad, I had been working for this closing attorney. When we came back, after he decided he wanted me back to Mississippi, then I went back to work for the closing attorney. At that time is when I applied for law school, got accepted, got scholarships and everything. And then just a few months later, found out literally like right around the same time that I was accepted and gotten all the scholarships that we were pregnant and we were going to be having my oldest son. And so I deferred from law school at that point. And then during that time, I was sending all my friends are graduating from college. They've gotten married. They're buying houses. So I'm sending them all to my buddy down the street who I did all of his loan closings for. And he was like, you should really think about getting licensed because you're sending me all this business. And I was like, but why would I want to do that? I had no idea what it meant to get licensed. I knew all about, the end of the line when it came to loan closings and all the legalese and all the verbiage and all of that. But I had really no idea what it took to get to the front end of it. And back then you just filled out a piece of paper, you did some fingerprints, like it was not as nearly as extensive as it is today. But I decided to do it on a whim. I was like, sure, I'll just do it on the side and, I'll just get paid here and there. It'll be like some extra money. I've got a baby coming. This will be a great little side gig. Well, like it was not very long before my side gig was paying me more money than my main gig. And so as soon as my son was born, I never went back to the law firm. I went out on maternity leave and then I got convinced to just jump in and do it full time. And it was terrifying. I mean, I've got this little baby, I've got to have income coming in, and I literally left the stability of my day-to-day job to jump into a commission-only position. But I couldn't fail. I mean, it wasn't an option. Like I had to succeed because for the first time in my life, it wasn't just me depending on me. I now have this little baby that, we've got to take care of and support as well. And that was what kind of started, my path on the mortgage side of things.
Well, I know you as such a driven person anyway. I don't think that, would you have done it anyway? Probably. But to have like the, I guess, freight train right behind you and you better run and hustle up, before you get ran over.
Exactly.
It certainly gives a different, like that is what it feels like. I mean, like.
Right. Literally. Yes. Yes.
So okay. You're married at 19, but you finish up school, a 3-year thing, then you're pregnant. Then you starting loans. Like, my goodness, I don't know a lot of people that start on loans just by just having a kid. Like that is like, you might as well say it's impossible. I mean, because it
right.
Here you are.
Yeah.
So and here, look, I know a lot about the back end of your story, and I can see how like stressful that would have been. I guess, what were your biggest challenges? Because here, like you ended up starting your own company, but you started at a certain place. And then I know that this marriage ends. I guess what led to it? I guess, speaking from a perspective of what divorce does to somebody, it's like death is what it feels like.
True. Yeah.
And because it's the death of an old you, and you have to become somebody different. I guess, walk us to that point and where you went from there.
Yeah. So, you asked about like challenges and stuff like that. So when I was first getting started, it was really easy to work with like my friends and peers and stuff like that. But if somebody who was 45 years old called me because they had been referred by their realtor, and they called and they get this kid on the other end of the line, is what it sounds like. It was really hard for me to, I wouldn't say it was hard. Once people started talking to me, they would know that I knew what I was talking about and I knew my stuff. But it took a while to get it just established to where it was like, yes, you should listen to this 25-year-old and let me tell you how you should, finance your home and what the best option is for you to do this. I had a lot of stereotypes just stacked against me. I was young, blonde, at the time, like, I still had all the like blonde jokes running against me. Still do today. Doesn't bother me a bit anymore. But you know, and then I was just
blondes
young.
have more funds, okay? Blondes
They
have more
do.
fun.
They do. Although we don't discriminate against hair color. But yeah, it was, you know, I felt like I had all the cards stacked against me where it would have been really easy to fail, but failure was not going to be an option for me. I had too many people depending on me, you know, and so life was very stressful. I would say it was, you know, having a baby, new career, things were just, it was hard. All of my family, or not my family, but my mom and my little brother and sister, they were still in California. My in-laws were in California. So we didn't have any grandparents close by. Once my son was about 2, we ended up moving back to California because we thought it would be better to be able to have family closer by. Just one, because I'm a huge family person. I want my kids to grow up with their grandparents, to know their grandparents and things like that. But our marriage was starting to break down as well. Life when you're 19 looks a whole lot different than it does when you're 25, 26, 27. I truly don't think that most people know who they are until they start to hit their mid-20s. And some people don't figure it out until they're in their 30s. And so as you're trying to navigate life, and I'm changing, I'm growing up, and he wasn't changing as much because he was a good bit older than me. And it was like, we started kind of bumping heads, and we went to marriage counseling. We did everything we could to try to make it work. But at the end of the day, we realized that we were just different people, and it really wasn't ever going to be the marriage that we wanted. And I'm not a proponent of divorce by any means, but I do believe that when you know that you are not on the path that you want to be on, that, raising your hand and saying, hey, you know what, this isn't going to work. I think that's a lot more noble than trying to stick it out for the kids at this point, which a lot of people do. And there's no right or wrong answer. That's just my personal belief on that. But I think that kids deserve to have 2 happy parents. And if they're not happy together, then something has to change. We tried to make the changes to where we would be happy together. And at the end of the day, we weren't. And so after counseling and everything, we ended up getting divorced. I met my husband in California. After all of that, we ended up meeting. He was from Alabama. He was probably the only Southern gentleman that existed in that little tiny town where I met him. But we found each other. And after a few years, we fell in love. We decided to get married. My mom had since moved back to Mississippi. His parents were still in Alabama. And after we got married, and then we found out we were expecting our first, I literally looked at him and I was like, okay, well, this little journey here in California has been fun, but I want to go home. And he had been out there for probably 15 years. We lived in a ski resort town, so it was a lot of fun, but it really was like a college town. Most people there were not settling down and having kids until well into their 40s. And so we decided to move back home. That's when I, jumped back into the mortgage business again, because I did take about actually, I guess it was a little longer. It's probably about a 3.5 year break from it while I was living in California. Because it was after the mortgage meltdown. Nobody was hiring anybody out there because their market was so crazy for so long. But yeah, came back home and went right back to work at the same brokerage that I had been at when I first got started. And then that kind of got crazy. We went through a lot of different transitions through the years. He had a death that, his father passed away, which was really hard for him. And that was my broker at the time. And so he ended up selling to another local broker. They sold to a bank. I did not love working for a bank. I had always been a broker. And so I was used to having a lot more control over my files and control over placement and where it went and the speed of things. And, I'm all about like following the rules and all that, but there's just, there's different ways to obtain a mortgage. And that was not really the life, or it just wasn't the channel that I knew. And so I tried the retail thing. I went through a little stint again after that with another bank. And I could not find my footing to get back to that happy place that I had when I started in the business and when I had worked for the broker before. And so I was literally at a point where I was like, you know what, like maybe mortgages just aren't for me now. Maybe things have just changed so much that there's something else I should be doing. Maybe I would be a better fit for a different industry. Maybe I should go back to school. What about law school? And during all this time, mortgage brokers were kind of in a renaissance phase, I guess you could say. They had taken a really bad rap for a long time with the whole mortgage meltdown and the recession that started back in 07, 08. And they were finally starting to get a lot more grounding when it came to just, the stigma, I guess, of being a mortgage broker wasn't viewed negatively anymore. And I finally felt like at that point, I was like, you know what? This is my last shot in the mortgage industry. I know I don't like doing it this way. I know I don't like doing it this way. And I knew that I had the knowledge behind me to be able to jump out and do it on my own. But there was a lot of fear there. I think I'm human. And so at the end of the day, it was like, am I going to be successful at this? Is my community going to support me through this? Is my family going to be okay with me working super long hours to, fulfill this dream of mine? Because I did, in the back of my mind, I did always want to have my own company someday. I certainly didn't imagine it happening, when it did or in my 30s. But I just jumped out there and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And what I learned through the process was that there is nobody out there that's going to believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And so if you don't believe in yourself enough, that you're not going to have the support to get it done. Like somebody else's belief in your dream is not what's going to pull you through. It has to start with your own. And so I really I put everything, like literally everything, into starting my own company and making sure that it was going to be successful. And I had a tremendous amount of support. It went really, really well. Within 4 months of opening my company, the broker that I had originally worked for, he was now working for another small brokerage down the street. And he called me and he was like, hey, he's like, my son and I will come work for you if you can do this, this, and this for us. And it was literally like, get them a laptop, make sure that they could, had access to certain programs, and got them some health insurance. And so within about 24 hours, I was like, got it all covered. When are you starting? And so we really came full circle. And so we still work together today. It's a great team. Like he's a great man, great lender, but he's beyond the days of wanting to own his own company. So for him, I'm not going to say he has one foot out the door, because that's not necessarily the case, but he's past the point of wanting to deal with reports and licensing and all of the other stuff that comes along with ownership. So it was a really great fit, and we love working together. And here we are. We're still going strong. So.
Well, I love that. I love that story. So and I remember all of these days too that you're talking about. What a great time to take off and be in California for the financial crisis.
Right.
And I'm assuming your husband had a good job. And I mean,
yeah, he did. He was a federal firefighter. And so he wasn't when we lived in Mississippi, but that was the position that he took once we moved out there. The funny part was that I was completely confident in my knowledge and what I could do and not do. So when we got out to California, I was like, I'm going to go find a job originating mortgages today. And in my naivety, I guess, I walked into all these different companies. There was only about 4 local companies that did mortgages in the town. I walked into every single one of them and I was like, hey, here's my resume. I want to come and work for you. I want to do mortgages. And they all just looked at me like, do you know what is happening in the world right now? And while I did know, I will say Mississippi was in a little bit of a bubble. So, we didn't have nearly, did they take a hit during all of that? Absolutely. But California really is one of the states where it hit first. And then we were in a resort area where most purchases were investment and second homes already. And these people literally just about laughed me out of their office. So that was definitely a very humbling experience, but I still never, even as long as I was out there, I ended up working as a paralegal for the county, for their team of attorneys that they had. So that was a great fit, and it all worked out well, but I never let go of that mortgage, just vision and dream. In the back of my head, I knew that was what I really loved to do and wanted to still somehow find my way back to it someday. And I did, thankfully.
I really love that. And you mentioned too here, you were a 25-year-old blonde woman in the industry, and truly, I think maybe it's the last 10 years, but definitely in the last 5. I personally believe that a woman has an advantage in the mortgage industry. Truly, that's just my personal thing, and it's because I started out calling leads LendingTree leads, and it's literally by the numbers. If you have a man and a woman of equal talents, the woman will win more than the man. It is true. It is literally by the numbers. But that's a now stat. I don't know if that was a then stat. And when I started, I was 23. And like, I mean, okay, little kid, tell me how to buy a house. So like, I totally get that. But like, really though, like, and if you have the perspective you do now, you were a little kid.
I was just a little, I mean, I truly was still growing up, and I'm trying to like walk into these banks, and because we sold a lot of our loans to banks, and it literally like the tables are definitely turning, and there's a lot more women in our industry now than there ever were in the past. But for a really long time, everybody that was at the head of all these companies, the majority of them were men. If they were female, they had been there for 30 or 40 years. It had been a lifelong, journey for them to get to where they were. So I definitely feel like it's a lot more advantageous for women now than it ever has been at any other time. But I love to see that too, because I know even for me, even when I opened my own brokerage, I went back to one of the banks that I had wholesaled with previously when I was working for the brokerage, and I was trying to get signed up with them, got signed up. And then when Steve and Josh, who worked for me, when they came on board, I was trying to get them signed up, and I was logging into the system, but I couldn't see any of their loans. And so I reached out to the lender, and I was like, hey, you've got something wrong with the way that my account's set up, because I can't even see my loan officer's loans in the pipeline, and I've got to be able to access them. And the guy responds back, and he was like, well, we're going to need permission from them for you to be able to view their pipeline. And I was like, hold on. I own the company and they work for me, and you're telling me that you need their permission for me to see their loans that are in the pipeline with your company. And it took, I don't even.
You were serious? They were serious?
Yeah, absolutely serious. And I feel like it took, it could have been an hour before I got a reply back, but it felt like a lifetime. And then he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, we've got that fixed for you. But the fact that their first initial reaction was to push back and tell me that I needed permission from my male officers, it was a very eye-opening experience. And I wish that I could say that that's only happened once, but it's happened in various different, capacities since I've opened my company. But I don't, at this point, I don't take it to heart as much. I know that there's a lot of people who've been in the industry a long time. They don't expect to see this 37-year-old girl busting through, the door that does own her own company. But as a result of that, it also made me a huge proponent for supporting other women, not only just in our industry, but just in general. It's easy to say that everything's even and it's equal, but it's still not. And so I love to be able to help empower women and, give them support, let them know that there's other people that are out there that have either done what they're trying to do or that will have their back on what it is that they're trying to do, and be able to support them through those same types of situations so that they don't necessarily have to walk down the dark roads to get there,
I think it's in you're mentioning women, but also young people,
in general. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that truly, I think people should you should get into it when you're 23, when you're 25, whatever it is. I mean, I'm looking at people's NMLS numbers. Can you believe there's in the 2 millions?
That's crazy.
It's nuts. What's your license? I'm 278-549.
I'm 102016.
You're 100,000. Okay, so back when they came out, if you recall this, it was like the difference between you getting it like now and like a month later was like 50 or 100,000. It the first couple of months, it was like a huge thing. And I don't know if maybe you clearly weren't this way, but our entire brokerage at the time, I was working for a tiny little brokerage in a small little town, and they were all like, no, we're anti-NMLS. This is all going to go away. They're going to fight the thing, and then it's all going to go away. And I remember thinking like, this probably will go away. And but anyway, I'm glad
it seemed like a knee-jerk reaction to try to fix, issues that had gone on in the industry. And so I think that everybody that was in the industry prior to like 07, 08 thought, well, once things kind of smooth over and balance out, then all that's going to go away. But what we have all learned is that it is going nowhere. And so,
and some of it's not bad, I mean, there's a lot
it's not.
There's a lot of good regulation that came from it. And then, okay, one other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to ask you about is that you said your kids deserve happy parents. I wanted to stop there for a second. I really love that. I think that that's something that is, you mentioned like a lot of times parents will stay together for the kids. I would argue that you're showing your kids how to live dysfunctionally. I would argue you're showing your kids how to be depressed, how to be sad, how to not live your best life. And I guess I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people that literally are only together because of their kids.
Right.
And I think that it's really sad, but I also think divorce is really sad. And I guess what's like the balance? Like you went to counseling, you tried, I think is that like the thing? Like, hey, look, you got to at least try, but like, I guess speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I know for me personally, it was not just like, let's go try counseling out for a few weeks. Like it was about a 2-year process from when things started first kind of breaking down, or we were mature enough to admit that things were breaking down, until we really decided, okay, we're going to get divorced and we're going to do this. But I feel like our role as parents, one, yes, it's to raise these like great kids, but ultimately I'm trying to raise a good adult in the future too. And there's so many parents that send their kids out into the world with all sorts of issues that they don't even know that they have, because they haven't, they didn't grow up in a household where they were able to see what true love looks like and what real happiness looks like. Like my kids and I, we love to or my husband and I, like we love to kiss in front of the kids because like we love each other. Like, I don't think that we shouldn't have to hide our affection. I want my kids to know what a loving relationship looks like, because I want them to have that same thing one day. I want them to know what it looks like to be happy, to be able to, not only do you each have things in your life that you love to do, but you have a life that you love to live together as well. There's just so many components that go into a marriage. I mean, you're taking two completely different people, you're putting them together and you're hoping that it's going to work. And for 50% of the people it does, but I don't even know what the stat is anymore, but if it was 50% of people that got divorced years ago, I can only imagine that it's probably higher now. And on one hand, that does make me sad. On the other hand, I think that a lot of people do jump into their first marriage and they're not ready, and it's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, like even if I was not married, even if I had not remarried, I would feel very confident in saying that my son was able to see both of his parents happy, that they were, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how happy someone else makes you. You have to be happy with yourself first. And kids see and they sense and they feel these things a lot of times, I think sooner than adults do. I mean,
you're 100% right. And you know what the thing is that they're not, but with the caveat of, or asterisk, I guess, of they can't articulate it because they're not actually adults. So they feel it, they see it, they know something's weird, they know something's off, they feel a little imbalanced or whatever they feel, they know something's wrong.
Right.
But they don't really know it's wrong. Like it's like a subconscious thing. And then like literally it comes out in therapy when they're 37.
Exactly.
Or whatever. And like me too. Like I deal with stuff from my parents getting divorced when I was 5. Now, and it's like, but I really love that. You kiss your husband and kiss your wife in front of your kids. Let them know and see what real true love is.
Exactly.
And I love that. Like it's just it's unashamed love. Like it doesn't have to be in a closet but they know that though. They know it. They see that. I think that's super healthy.
Yeah. I mean, and like date nights, like we're always going to have our date nights and we're going to take that. And, and our kids might kick and scream and like, no, mom, please don't leave. They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
But we need our time together too, because it's our relationship ultimately that brought these kids into this world.
Right.
So, we have to continue to foster that. And a lot of people kind of let the relationship become second to raising the children for so many years.
Right.
And to me, they're equally as important. And
Or
so
career, or career comes second to, or
exactly.
whatever it is. There's a million things that substitute for it, but
Yeah,
and the
very
stat
true.
is 50% of marriages don't last 5 years, and actually there's good friend of both of ours, Phil Treadwell, talks about that second marriages actually have a higher success rate than first marriages. And why? Because you've already been through a failure, and you kind of understand how it can fail.
Right.
And this is just great advice, because look, a lot of people actually do struggle with this in our industry. It's kind of something that's not talked about. I feel like it carries a lot of shame and guilt, but it's not really shameful and guiltful to want to, go after your truest self, your happiest self, and living your best life, not just for yourself, but so that for your kids. If you're strong, that's what your kids want and need.
Yeah. Well, I think just humans in general, we don't want to admit when we failed, right? And there's really, when you're married, and I mean, it's just news to the world right here that I have failed at something. And so I think that being able to take ownership of that, and then you controlling the narrative of the failure that's occurred in your life versus just having a stamp on your forehead. Oh, I was another marriage that failed right here. I think it's learning from it, figuring out what went wrong, what you could have done better, why you did it. And there's no, in our home, I mean, if my kids ask about my first marriage, I talk about it. I never like bash my ex-husband or anything like that, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter how much we didn't get along. It doesn't make him a bad person. We just weren't a good fit for being married. And, and so I'll answer questions about it, and I'll tell them about it. And every now and then they'll have questions about like, well, are you and dad going to break up one day too? And I'm like, absolutely not. Like, it's completely different, but I'm very open and just honest and vulnerable with them about it, because I want them to understand that they do have safety in our home. We don't fight in front of our kids. We don't fight very often at all. But I think do we disagree at times? Absolutely. Do we have arguments from time to time? Absolutely. But we keep that separate and apart from the kids. And, I want them to understand how stable their own home life is and how much they are very, very loved.
Well, I think truly too, it's the sign of a healthy marriage that you argue and that you disagree, because it means you're communicating. You can't just possibly go through your entire day in life with zero arguments and zero disagreement.
Right.
It's impossible. And if you are, your communication's cut off. But I really love that you're vulnerable in front of your kids, because I think that it goes to something you said earlier, and I'll capitalize on, is that, like, look, we're not trying to raise good children. We're trying to raise good adults.
Yeah.
And a good adult is vulnerable. They do tell their feelings in a real way to convey what it is that they're feeling, and to influence people to be better. And you can't do that if you're living a lie. And you can't do that if you're just totally closed off, or we're not going to talk about it. Yeah, this is a major point in my life that I'm just never going to let you in. I mean, it's just like, are you even family? And I think it's powerful that you do that. So, all right. I want to be super respectful of your time, Michelle.
And likewise, yeah. I've like we could chat all day long.
I know. I've loved this. I've loved this interview. This has really been great. And I have a couple questions that I ask everybody that comes on. I want to make sure that I get these out. So,
sure.
First one is this: do you feel like you've ever had a big break?
Yes.
Elaborate.
Yes. Honestly, I mean, I feel like for me, my big break was probably the most life-changing as far as my career, was when I went to start working and got my license the very first time originally. It was not something that was on my radar. It was, at the time, I was not super, I mean, I was happy in my marriage, but like I knew that there were starting to kind of be a little bit of issues. I'd been through a lot growing up. And so for someone else to have that belief in me and say, you would be really good at this, you should come and do that. That was huge for me, because I don't know that this is where I would have ended up had I not met him. And so that was definitely, there weren't many people that were just going and hiring young, blonde 25-year-olds on the street to get into the mortgage industry, but he believed in me and made me believe in myself even more as a result of that. And so I know that was definitely my break in the mortgage industry, was that very first position that I had.
That's super cool. If you were to do it all over again, Michelle, what would you change?
Gosh. It's easy to say what we would change. I think, honestly, if anything, I probably would have learned to be a little bit more vulnerable and open with the people around me earlier and sooner in life, and not felt like I had to hide parts of my story or not share parts of my story because people would think negatively about me. I'm honestly, I'm at the best place I've ever been in my life. I'm happy with my career. I'm content, with everything that I'm doing. I have a fantastic marriage. I mean, I wouldn't have changed anything that got me to here. But when it came to just different relationships and friendships and even business in general, and part of this, I think, goes back to Amplify. And then I'm also like a huge Brene Brown fan, but I think had I learned to communicate a little bit better and been a bit more open and vulnerable, it probably would have changed some relationships throughout my life. And I don't know how that would have impacted me, but that probably would have been one of the things that I changed, was just not being afraid to share more and talk about the real.
I love it. I mean, that's fire advice, 100%. Was there ever a time, Michelle, you felt like giving up?
Absolutely. Yep. And really, it was before probably the biggest pivotal moment, which was opening my own office, and opening my own company. I was very burnt out. I didn't love where I worked. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel connected. I was having a really big disconnect with the fact that I wanted to represent my borrowers the best way possible, but I also had to answer to the board of a bank and the people that sign my paychecks. And I was really struggling with that. And so that's when I was questioning everything. Is this for me? Should I do something else? I can go sell anything. Maybe I go back to school. And, but I knew in my heart that that was not what I wanted. And so instead of giving up and, possibly writing all that off as a failure of sorts, I literally went and bet on myself, or probably the biggest bet I've ever had in my life, and took that chance. And I'm so glad that I did.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. All right. Final question to set it up. So there's a young Michelle out there. Yes. And, maybe they are looking to go to law school. Maybe their parents got divorced, in high school. Maybe they're living with aunt and uncle. Maybe they're, considering getting married at 19. Maybe they're having a child very young. Maybe they're, 25, considering getting into the mortgage industry. What advice would you give to someone looking to get it done?
I think one of the best things that you can do when you're in that situation is find the people that you aspire to be like, surround yourself with them, talk to them, meet them, ask them questions. It's there's so many people that just internalize everything, and you're going through these hard times, you're going through these struggles, you feel like you're completely alone. But when you are able to connect and talk to these people and listen to their advice, good things like podcasts like this, and truly take it to heart. I mean, I think that's the best thing that they can do. I mean, if you want to be, I don't care if you want to be a nurse or a doctor or an attorney or a plumber, whatever you want to do, go find people that are doing that. Talk to them, find out where their failures have come from, find out what they would have done differently. If you are going through a hard spot with your marriage, seek out, talk to other people who are either married and have gotten through those tough times. Go to counseling, get the help, but just don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, I don't know all of the answers. and be willing to talk to others, listen to others, and just know that you don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to get through it alone. Nobody knows everything. And I know it's been pivotal for me, not only my career, but just my life. The people that you surround yourself with are so very important. Like if you're young and you want to have a great career, but you're hanging out with all of your friends all day that are sitting on the couch, you're probably not going to launch into some massive career anytime soon until you start changing that circle that you're with. And so it's just, find the people that are doing what you want to do, find the people who have been through the situations that you've been through, talk to them, listen to them, heed their advice. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable with them and open up to them. I think all of that is priceless. And the sooner that people realize that they can do it and that there are people out there who are willing and able to talk to them, to help mentor them, whatever it may be, like the more successful they'll be at being able to get it done in their own life.
I love it. What a great answer. That's really great, Michelle. I love that.
Thanks.
All right. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. I especially want to thank Michelle and for coming on. My goodness, what a powerful story. If someone was looking to reach out to connect with you, Michelle, what would be the best place for them to do so?
A couple different places. One, all of my contact information is everywhere, all over my website, which is mslending.net. I have a podcast of my own also called Blondes Have More Funds. You can find it on any of the major podcast hosting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google. Facebook, I'm under Michelle Dugan. Instagram, Michelle Dugan. So thankfully, there's not too many of us Michelle Dugans out there in the world. So,
gosh, you're lucky. There's like 10 million James Ryans out there. So you got to spell it. You got to put Jimi on it to get any action on it. But yeah,
that makes sense. Now I understand the Jimi.
Well, it was a mistake actually at Amplify. Renee misspelled.
I remember. Yes.
It was you literally witnessed it. Some people don't believe me. Oh yeah, right. Yeah. You just did that.
You just have 7 names with 7 spellings.
Right, exactly. And hey, look, Blondes Have More Funds. I did think it was more fun because listening to the show, it's basically you guys just have so much fun on the show.
We have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Like grab a glass of wine and then you're basically having a glass of wine with Michelle listening to her podcast. It's just super fun.
That's exactly what Ashley and I do. We grab a glass of wine and then we start talking. And sometimes it's like 2 hours and our editors hate us. And then other times it's like 45 minutes and we're like, did we really run out of stuff to say today?
That's so funny. Well, Blondes Have More Funds.
That's right.
Check it out yourself. All right. Again, I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And if you've taken any value from today's show and you'd like to support us, hey, can you do me a favor? Could you open up Apple Podcasts, scroll down to the bottom and tap the 5-star? It would mean the world to me. It would mean the world to Michelle too. She could give me a nice little, ding, 5-star. And, extra credit, you could write us a review, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend. All those things make a huge difference in helping us reach more people. Once again, I am Jimi Ryan. This has been the Get It Done podcast. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks for having me.